Welcome to Between Two Clinicians, the podcast that gives you a backstage pass into the mind of two therapists. I'm Talia.
I'm Adam Luke. We've spent years helping others navigate the complexities of their minds and relationships.
In this podcast, we're flipping the script, and we're sharing our own unfiltered insights. No topic is off limits, and no issue too taboo. We're ready to tackle the tough stuff with honesty and empathy. Let's dive in.
Well, hello.
All right. Hello.
It's good to see you.
Third time's a charm.
We have literally started this intro 3 times because I want to just call it was spiritual warfare. Microphones weren't working. Echoes were happening.
The powers that be. They're like, no. Are you sure you want to talk about this? Yes, we're sure.
I feel like the universe is kind of nudging us right now.
No, it's a good topic. I could see them nudging for next time's episode, but this one I think is relevant. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I'll have you take it away because this is your brainchild.
Okay, so the thought process we're sort of trying to open up today is the success tax, the cost of outgrowing your circle. And we're going to come at it from a little different position than most do on this conversation. Normally, you'll hear people use a phrase like, oh, well, it's really lonely at the top, right? Yeah. And this is more about instead of when you hit that mountain peak in your life, but like how do you navigate when the journey feels like it starts off with a bunch of you and then you start to recognize that there's fewer and fewer of you around. Something that is an interesting process that I've sort of noticed in my own life is that there are periods of time in my life where when it was either creating my business or was getting my master's degree, in certain ways socially I had to go silent, right? Like there's such demands on me to get my master's or to be pre-licensed. And what's interesting is as that silence happens, after you really are diligent and disciplined in what you choose, then the relationships to you that felt so meaningful, so, like they were pillars in your life, supportive, just start like disappearing. And how do you navigate that when you try to come back afterwards, maybe after you've had the accomplishment, after you've sort of reached your goal, and then you recognize that the ability to have those friendships aren't really available anymore?
Do you find, whether like personally or professionally, that it seems to be mutual or it seems to be one-sided? I can think of in my own life examples of both, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think one side where it's like mutual is like when you start having kids. It's just natural. It feels so weird when you first start navigating this and your friends first start having kids.
Yes.
And it's something that you really have to experience for yourself of like, there's sleep cycles, there's regressions, there's problems with breastfeeding, there's all sorts of things that sort of step in the way where
demanding.
All of a sudden trying to have a set schedule or trying to find time to escape, there is this,
LOL.
Exactly. LOL. Yeah. Well, because like, I don't know, my wife and I kind of joke about this. Sometimes when we hire a babysitter, we're like, are you okay if we just go into our room and sleep? Like there's this aspect of like going out doesn't sound as fun. Or we don't know how many times we've like planned a date and then we go just like sit in a parking lot, listen to a podcast, watch a movie on someone's phone, like, and you sit back and you're like, well, but in the past I'd be so much like, we've got to go to this place and this place and this place and pack it in, and it's just not there anymore. And I think that there are relationships that are also just seasonal. Like they're not
so true.
They're not built for a lifetime, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine.
I think the pain comes from thinking it was going to be, and then like it's like, oh, this is an annual or like a perennial whatever friendship, and then it's like, nope, actually this was just an orchid. They're very difficult to maintain and keep alive, and once it's dead, it's dead. Like exactly. Which kind of friendship do you have, or which kind of collegial relationship, which kind of, we'll just use the word relationship for like two people relating to one another in various contexts. If we're not on the same page, or we don't continue to be on the same page about what the kind of friendship is, that is like the success tax. It's not just the cost of being successful or hitting milestones. It could be personal growth and personal development along those years that leads people to become different versions of themselves. And I've had friendships where there is a clear rupture or a clear growing apart because of grad school, because
Mm-hmm.
of being a therapist, because of calling them out on a pattern in their romantic relationship that they didn't want to hear, and then we
Absolutely.
have a friendship breakup, and it was hard. I'm thinking of two friends in particular. It was hard for those year and a half, a couple years to not have them because they were like my high school best friend and my
Oh
college
yeah.
best friend. And then within, I would say, a few months, a couple of years after the ruptures, which were also a few months apart,
Yeah.
everything got shaken up. And I got a phone call from one of them, and we made a good repair. And we needed to have that break because we have a much healthier friendship now. We're still friends years later.
Yeah.
And the other one called me and was like, "Hey, you were right. Like, we got a divorce. I'm so sorry." He tried to keep like, and I wasn't going to stay and force that, but I wasn't also going to let my friend be treated like crap and not say anything. And I was willing to lose, not like holier than thou, but like in my head, I was willing to lose the friendship over telling the truth and trying to get them to wake up and be like, this is not healthy for you. Like, and I'm not going to stand by your side. And I was both of their maid of honors. Like, I literally was the VIP person. And I was like, one of them I went through with, one of them I backed out of, and I didn't mind being the villain.
Yeah.
Like, you want to, that's fine. Like, and it's, again, not ego. Like, I was right. It was more just like, I saw it coming. Like, I called that pattern out, and because I am not a shy person, this friend, I own it. The friendship couldn't have maintained because I wouldn't shut up about it because I was so, trying to defend my friends. That's like the personal side of things that you can grow and change, and sometimes there's the season is not there because you both need to do your own inner work and then come back together. And if you meet at that adult level, like, who knows if you would have just started a friendship if you had just met that day, but because you have the history and you've grown together, you can reignite the friendship, and it might look different. You might, like you're saying, seasonally, you might not be hanging out. My college best friend, we'd hung out like 5 times a week. She doesn't live here anymore. We have a kid, they have like, that's just not realistic for that to be happening, but it doesn't mean we're not friends. So that's an important caveat, that like the success tax can be the friendship looks different. It doesn't have to mean it goes away. But what you were describing is the friendships that are like, this can't exist anymore, and you're not getting the feedback on why that's happening. It just kind of goes silent. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like at times, like our mutual friendship is sometimes like hating on certain seasons in our life, right? So like, the way that I'm going to share it is, a long time ago, I had a mentor drop on me the law of the sixes, and the way that he said was, if you go find 5 miserable people, you'll be the 6th. If you go find 5 extremely driven people, you'll be the 6th. And so some of these friendships, I think, do like fit challenges that you're experiencing. And what's interesting is that as soon as you start moving outside of those challenges, like perfect example is like when you're becoming a pre-licensed clinician, the world feels like, everything's a millstone around your neck.
Right.
But then like in those friends groups, you start to recognize like people start getting licensed at different times. People start, whether it's their first licensed job or they start their private practice or whatever it might be. What's interesting is there seems to be like at times a pivot point where all of a sudden, instead of being friends, now I'm competition. And it's interesting that like once that mindset of like, well, your life doesn't mirror my life anymore, then it's almost like we start assigning like the you versus me or us as us versus them. And I'll say like my one friend Jeff a long time ago, I'll never forget. He just straight up told me like, Adam, I don't see you as competition. I always felt like that was a weird statement because of just like the way that I don't see you as competition. But I started.
Why feel the need to say it?
I think that he actually had premonition that he was experiencing this through other friends in the therapy world.
I see. Okay.
Oh, like, I just want to be friends. I don't want to be competition. I don't want to be.
I see. Yeah.
And it was interesting because I had the same response you did. Like, what are you not threatened by me?
It feels like a weird thing to point out. It's like, just so you know, I don't hate you. It's like, I wasn't worried. Now I am. I wasn't before, but okay. Like, should I hate you? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah, I think he was just brave enough to say the thing
He
out
saw
loud.
he's experienced it before.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to plant it as like a
No, it wasn't
shadow
like
side where he's like, just so you know I'm not, but deep down he's like, oh my God, I'm so intimidated.
No, not at all.
I see.
But I think that it's interesting to sort of pay attention to friends groups that are like recruiting, where it's like, as long as we're all struggling, as long as private practice isn't working for us, whatever it might be, we're all good. But as soon as you become the hostile to the system because you find a breakthrough path or whatever it is,
you're not struggling anymore.
Then all of a sudden you're ostracized.
That's like the episode we did on the when you're in a relationship and you're bonding over like alcoholism or unhealthy coping skills, or you're only getting loaded, and then both of you get sober, or you get a job, and like the relationship's only meant to exist under certain pretenses, and if it's maladaptive or suffering or misery as the pretenses, naturally that outsider, and social psych as well, that outsider or the outlier who is not miserable and is now successful, you don't have common ground to stand on. You became the other that all of you used to bond over not being. So you get put in the out group until you find enough other people in the out group who are like the new in group, the success, the leveling up. And, you know, that I think that can take time. Like you're saying, especially in the therapy community, when you're going from pre-licensed to licensed, I never liked the judgment that it's like, we're the more educated ones. Again, not to be egotistical, like literally we're in school and training and very afraid to maintain our license. Arguably, we are going to be way more up to date on all the ethics and up to date on this in the trainings, because we don't want to lose the thing we just worked so hard for. Versus if you talk to somebody licensed 50 years, they're like, notes? What are those? I haven't kept a record in ages. Where it's just like, oh, you're playing really fast and loose. Yeah.
What the hell's going on?
That's not legal, I don't think. Yeah.
And so for like, I know a lot of our listeners are not clinicians, so I think the other way
any career thing, right? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it is like
pre-law, college to grad school. Yeah, you're an intern. Buying a home. Yeah, renting to buying a home for sure.
It's just interesting how like some people will disinvite themselves to your life, and I want you to listen to that for and that because there's actually this is making space for you to have a concert of support around you, but. See, this is what normally how our mind goes is as we see more people sort of moving towards the door, we then go immediately to, is this my fault? Did I do something wrong? And I think that like you did a great job, Talia, before we started, you were asking me about something in my life. And you're like, did you think, did you have a role in this?
I learned that from one of my friends with her kid. She's like, what did you do? She doesn't automatically defend her son. She's like, what was your part in this, kiddo? And he's like, I did push him first. And it's like, what did you expect, right? So I said it obviously more lovingly and less accusatory than that, because you're not a little instigator like he is. I love him so much. But there is that level of like,
absolutely,
could it have been something that you said? Like, let's not leave a blind spot unseen. Yeah,
we need to have that level of introspection.
Yes.
Once you have had that and you can recognize like, I don't think I actually did.
I don't think so. Or I asked and they didn't tell me, so I'm going to assume
that I didn't.
Yeah.
Then it's moving into the direction of like, well, I've got to actually let people leave. Because like this is because this is the inverse. This is how I like the thought process I wrestle with.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me to try to influence a person to stay, I have to stop choosing myself, my family, my wife, my kid, all the goals that I want.
That's not it. That's not worth it.
Yeah. Is that something I'm willing to do? The plain and simple is it's not something I'm willing to do. So that's why, like, when people work with me professionally, they hear me talk a lot about, like, well, that's a strategy, that's an opportunity.
I use those words too, definitely.
Like, because this is what we're doing. I'm not asking someone to join me in this process. I'm making an invitation. Like,
it's not a court order. It's not a court order. Exactly. It's just
not
like
yeah. It's not like I refuse to be that person in your life. And a lot of people, because of the shitty relationships that have been role modeled to us, will ask for that. We'll ask for people to actually set a benchmark on like what our intrinsic value is or how we're going to be cherished in a person's life. I'm not asking for that. What I am looking for is, are there any fellow travelers that want to join me in this process? Like, it's going to be inherently messy. It's not going to be perfect. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the experience.
Hey there, listeners. Are you tired of settling for less than you deserve in your relationships? Do you ever feel like you're not being seen, heard, or valued the way that you want? Or maybe you've been wondering why you keep attracting the same kinds of people into your life, or why certain patterns seem to repeat themselves in your relationships. The answer might be deeper than you think, and you can find it in my new course. Rewire Your Relationships is a transformative course designed to help you stop settling for less than you deserve and start embodying your most confident, assertive, and authentic self in your relationships. You'll explore how your early experiences and parental influences have shaped your views on love, dating, and self-worth. This isn't just about tips and tricks for dating. It's about understanding the core beliefs that drive your relationships that you attract. You'll learn how to break free from those old patterns and start creating the kind of connections that truly reflect who you are. Imagine stepping into a relationship with clarity and confidence, knowing you're attracting people who value and respect you for who you really are, your deeply authentic self. The Rewire Your Relationship course gives you the tools to rewrite your relationship story, one where you're no longer settling, but thriving. Visit taliabombola.com/rewireyourrelationships or check the link in the show notes for more.
How have you had to navigate this, Talia?
Oh my God, where did I start? Well, the friends I already mentioned, like personally, that was an up level. In relationships where when we were like younger and dating and both of us lived at home, or then one of us got an apartment or the other one had an apartment and one of us lived at home, I think those were some differences in like navigating it of like, oh, like in some ways the relationship can expand more, but in other ways it's like that's just not a dating bracket that I would put myself in. And I'm not making it about dating, but like when you up level, I remember I had one friend and we were like similar work style, similar professionalism, and we were close for a little bit. I was pre-licensed, she was licensed already, and then there started to be some weird energy, I guess you could say, back and forth. And then COVID happened, or like the pandemic, and I was just like, okay, like this is the time to rely on socialization. I'd see her make posts of like, I want, I'm looking for my community and my this, and I'd reach out and she's like, oh, thanks, I'm not up for it. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like you literally just post. It was gaslighting to a T. And I'm like, I can't be the only one that's feeling this way. We're going back and forth, and she's like, she posted this one thing. She's like, oh, or she texted me why she couldn't hang out and canceled on a mutual third friend that we used to hang out all the time. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And the other friend and I still met up. I'm like, dude, she's being weird. Like, I don't know what it was. To my knowledge, asked point blank, nothing was shared. It was given this nebulous therapist response of like, this is just the time of year I go inward. And then the next winter, she's like, this is the time I'm most social. I'm like, can you pick a lane? Jesus. So we're going back and forth. And I was just like, I'm just going to address it. And I'm like, look, I'm sick of reaching out to you and not being given that in response. You're giving me mixed messages based on literally what you're sharing with everybody in the world. She had bought a house. I just got my place. I'm like, we should have a house, like not together, but I'm like, if you have a housewarming, let me know. You're welcome to mine. And she's like, I don't think I'm going to, but ended up having just so much of it. Now that now that we're talking about it's bringing it back up again. But this feeling of,
I can feel like the rosé being open
right
now.
this feeling of, there's something she's not telling me that I know is occurring, and I don't like being lied to or gaslit. And I got my sweet penance years later. I was talking to another friend and she's like, I cannot stand her. She snaked my entire intellectual property when I was in this group. I had to tell the mentor, like she didn't do that to me, but like she had done it, but under the guise of just like, oh, I was just whatever, very passive. And then eventually she's a narcissist, but she like moved and changed identity. It was just this, not like witness protection level, but just like if I had met this person today, we would not be friends because we are so different. And that was kind of the universe's way of slowly unpinning us. It hurt at the time because I wasn't ready to unpin. Had this version of this person been presented at that moment of the first unpinning, I'd be like, oh yeah, hell yeah, we're done. Like I don't need to be friends with this person. But like you were saying, it's the knowing when to let go. I kept going back because I wasn't ready to let go. Whereas if I had done a little bit more of the radical acceptance or the like, let them come to me. I was very clear about my requests or my desires. And it was triggering. And I've had it with another friend who's also a colleague, where the more work she did on herself, the more boundaries she had. This is going to sound weird saying it, like the more boundaries she had around time and space and like self-protection. And the part of me that felt entitled previously, I did a lot of shadow work on this, like the part of me that felt entitled to the time because we were both in that season of like, let's just hang out all the time. And when that went away, because of, again, very good things, strong boundaries, energetic protection, not people pleasing, all the things I teach my clients to do. But the petulant shadow side of me is like, no, not to me. Like, I still want time together because I like you. I almost projected what happened with the first friend I mentioned onto that friend, but I didn't allow that. I said, I have no proof of that. And when I had reached out, she actually said, and I know this has happened to you before with another friend. I want you to know that's not what's happening here. I'm really just going through it. And I was like, okay, I respect that. It was like a year or so after, and I was like, universally, you just crossed my mind. I'm not asking to hang out. I just wanted to let you know, like, I got this weird ping from the universe. And she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you reached out. We hung out a couple times. She explained a lot of why. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, not, you know, oh, you should have told me. But she's like, and I didn't tell anyone. And I was like, well, thank you for trusting me with that. Now that makes total sense why you needed time to yourself. And, you know, let me know if I can best support you, you know. And it's again, it's a different evolution of a friendship, but looking at the juxtaposition of working with somebody or trying to maintain with somebody who's doing their own work in the second case versus somebody who's just like using therapy speak against you and like weaponizing you and gaslighting you, essentially, that's not the friendship that you want to pursue. So long-winded way of saying, like, how do I deal with it? If it is they just can't be direct. One of my biggest triggers is passive aggression. You know this from all my personal stuff. I can't deal with it.
Yeah, there's no quicker way to go to Chernobyl with Talia than being passive
I cannot stand passive aggression. I would much rather prefer assertiveness and directness. So for me personally and professionally, if it's the passive aggressive avoidance, gaslight, blame route, no thank you. If it's the direct, even if it's nebulous of like, I'm going through a lot, I will reach out when I can. Okay, I trust that that is what they're going to do. And I also, unless they explicitly say, please don't reach out to me unless I reach out to you, I just let them know I'm thinking about them occasionally when I do, if I feel called to. And I allow them to know that like that line of communication is still open. I'm sending them good vibes. I'm sending them positive thoughts. And that is also my work to do. If that higher level of success costs certain relationships, I stop fighting it. At this point in my life, I don't try to stay past when it's time to leave. I'm not trying to stay like, you know, last call's at 1:00. The lights are coming on in the barn. I'm like, I'm staying till 5 a.m. It's like, I'm not that special. They're not going to let me. Like, please leave the establishment, ma'am. Like, you have to learn to leave when it's honestly before it's time to go. And I've lived enough to know the patterns of like, I feel as though this is heading where this other one headed, and I'll try to address it assertively. And if I get the literal or vibe, you know, inclination, that's where it's going, I go, I'd rather not stay and regret staying than leave and regret like, oh, I should have maybe stayed a little bit longer. The safer option is I could have stayed longer. I don't know how it was versus I definitely know it was way too long to stay and now I'm hurt. You can't unlearn those things.
Well, and I think what you're flirting with there is like as when you can feel it move into obligation.
My narrative therapist, when I was an associate actually, and she was an associate, she was the best. I love you, Panthea. She quoted me in like she gave a closing gift when we wrapped up, and because it's narrative, she had all the lines and quotes. It wasn't like a weird quoting me, like it's literally narrative therapy. And one of the things I said that she gave it to me, little like framed my thing to leave was, I don't look forward to obligations. I look forward to commitments. And this theme has been something I've worked on all those years ago since grad school, where it's like when I'm committed to something and I want follow through and the other person wants follow through, I love commitments. I don't look forward to it if it feels like an obligation. I thought I had it in here, but it's at my house.
And so like, where does that fit in what we're talking about? I think that's when you have to have those levels of introspection of like when you start to recognize that these friendships are headed for the doors is like, I refuse to put obligation on the relationship as the only way that we're going to be able to maintain connection, right? So
or feeling like under duress or they have to. Nobody wants to go park and be like, oh, I hate going to lunch with this friend.
I don't want to have a relationship where it feels like a tug of war
or like begrudging. It's not good energy.
It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so like that's been probably the most eye-opening thing for me professionally and personally is allowing people to speak through their actions and behaviors. Like if I reach out, people don't reach back.
Okay.
I still, trust me, there's a part of me that still struggles with like that. I wish that relationship could return to what it was.
Yeah.
But if they don't have the desire to invest in the relationship, I'm also not willing to be an unequal partner in that.
No, it's a memory. We touched before we started our 3 episode 3 attempt recording. I forget exactly how I worded it, but it was that theme of like eventually all you have to go off of are those shared memories and bonds. And at one point that's what was the gasoline to keep the friendship going, was wanting to make more memories and bonds.
Absolutely.
But there is a tipping point where it's like, no, like we need to know if that season is over. And I think as a society we don't do a great job of prepping people for I was listening to a different podcast on how GLP-1s worked, and the next episode after that was what's his name from Queer Eye, Jonathan Van Ness, JVN's podcast, and there was like a friendship coach. The episode was like, how do I know my friendship's over, featuring whatever her name was. And I was like, friendship coach? Where was this when I was in middle school, or all this other stuff? And why can't I? It just led me down this rabbit hole. Like, that's so smart, because it's one of the not tended to relationships, right? We have family therapy, we have couples therapy. At this rate, most people don't want that anymore with somebody. So friends are the way to go. Like, that's going to be probably on the rise, is like friend. And I did that in my counseling center. There was a couple of friend groups over the year I was there that wanted to come in, like, because the triangulation, or one of them, they started dating. And so it was awkward. Like, I think it's necessary to talk about those seasons of friendships that we were taught. I was taught this, that like when you make a friend, it's like your best friend. Not that everyone's your best friend, but you have one best friend, and nobody else can be friends with your best friend because it's just for the two of you. Which weird, possessive, jealous, like ownership thing.
And it starts so young, right?
Like so young, like kindergarten. You're my best friend. I carded in a tree, okay? Like,
exactly. Yeah. Blood brother.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's like best friendship, then there's like friendship, and then there's acquaintances. But if we look at it, it's like having close friends, right? Like not just one, but like having close friends where there's we've given that house example, the analogy of like some people make it to your front yard, your foyer, your living room, but like rarely do people make it upstairs metaphorically in the house. And your bedroom, your most private thoughts and intimate thoughts are probably for like you and maybe your significant other or your therapist, because it's your really safe internal world, and you don't just share that, hopefully, with everyone, unlike some people on social media. I digress. Learning about the different levels of friendships can help you understand not every friendship is going to be a close friend. Some just stay acquaintances, and not every, like, so there's the closeness levels, and then there's the longevity timeline level as well. Not every relationship is meant to have strong longevity, and some are meant to be in your life for a certain season. So if you learn to just relax on it and have boundaries, but allow it to unfold, and look at the words and actions, are they congruent? How do we interact with each other? Does it still feel good and responsive? And I'm not saying every time it has to be totally mutual, because there's been times I've helped you out with stuff that far more you've helped me out with stuff, because I was going through some shit and I was like, please help. And that was a season, right? That's a season that we're still, that I'm still dealing with, but not as intensely. And I am forever grateful that I had you. And it's not like I would never check in, but it was more obvious that the friendship, it's we have longevity, and because of that there's seasons where it's like, this, my friend's really going through it right now, versus if it's an acquaintance and you're like, the 2 times we hung out they just complain about this, I don't want to hang out with them anymore.
I don't have the ability, right?
Because there's not longevity or the echelon of closeness time. Exactly.
Like, and it's funny because I think sometimes people don't realize this podcast is like group therapy for you and me. It's like we sit down and we're like, okay, it's on the schedule. Let's roll with it. No, away it goes.
I love it. Yes.
But I think that it's also, we've had to navigate that, like we've had to prioritize a podcast.
Yeah.
Right. And like there was even a period of time where we may have not gotten off the ground with the podcast because my life was crazy. I had certain things I was having to cancel.
Yeah.
And you checked me up and was like, is this going to be something that like you're like, I need your in or I need your out?
Yeah.
And it was like, no, I really want to do this. And then we were able to lean into those. And I think that that's a special dynamic as well, where you have to pay attention to, sometimes you have to click in with a friend and you have to say, is this actually something that's important to you?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because like the other thing that I talk about with clients a lot is people will be like, well, I look at my maids of honor or my best man, and then like I never saw them again. Right. And like, and there is this like this dynamic where you have to ask, like, if they're going to be in your wedding pictures, tell me why they need to be there. And so this is like a new dynamic I've been doing with my clients is like, tell me why. Why do they need to be there? Right.
Why you have 16 of them? There's science.
Exactly.
The younger you get married, the younger you get married, the larger your wedding party, and the larger your wedding parties, the more likely you are to get divorced.
Well, and I think that the dynamic there is because we keep superficial relationships around ourselves, and sometimes
it's all for the photos. It's
and
all
the wedding
for the photos.
itself is superficial, right?
Yeah, and who has that many friends? By the way, I like maybe 3 people in the world. Okay, I definitely wouldn't have a 12-person wedding party.
Well, I think that you can also speak to like people who have 16 friend group or whatever.
Yeah.
It's probably insecurity. Like I have a lot of people around me, so I don't feel alone, but I don't have a lot of people who know who I am.
Yeah.
And like this is a dynamic there where like you should be sort of looking at your friends group and saying like, I understand why my friends group exists. I understand why these people are in my group.
Totally.
Because like something that happened a couple of weeks ago is I was in a different state for one evening and I found out that I had another friend that was in the area. And what's amazing is it was 2 text messages and he was at my hotel picking me up.
Perfect.
And it's like, I know that friendship is like set in stone.
Right.
But like, I know that like all we had to have was the excuse that we were in the same state together. Boom.
Yep.
We went out and we had fun.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that don't test the validity of the relationships that are around them. So this
they
is
make
the other
either false assumptions in either direction.
Exactly.
Very good point.
Oh no, they like when I work with my celebrity clients or my artists or all this, they're constantly navigating this because guess what? When the liquor cabinet's full, it's easy to have friends. When the food's paid for, it's easy to have friends. When you the private jet, it's easy to have friends.
Yeah.
But then when you talk about like who will actually go out there and split a bill, like you pay your shit, I'll pay my shit. That's a different.
Or who will be there if it's like, hey, like the NFL, like, hey, I know that it was this whatever signing bonus and this and that, and they're just around for that. But if it's like, hey, I need a ride to the hospital or my girl's in labor or whatever else, they're like, yeah, deal with it on your own. Like, why are certain friends wanting to be in connection and friendship, and is it more of a parasitic relationship where one person is clearly gaining more than the other? And if the tables were turned, or if the variables, whatever, if the environment of the experiment, if you will, is not the same, would there still be those variables there, i.e. the friends? And sometimes it's not. Like, it's not a true test of friendship is like, who could you call in the middle of the night if you needed somebody to help watch your kids? Or even if they're not in the state, who would be willing, right? And we're not going to gauge it off of like literal ability in this case. Like, who would answer the call? Who would be there for you? It's like the movie Uncle Buck.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're calling, and they call the uncle, and the wife's like, oh gosh, I don't know, but he was there, even if he wasn't feel competent, he's going to be willing to help. And who is your village when you need that help? Even if you don't have constant touch points, when you have those instances of relating, do you feel close? Do you feel close in terms of like respectiveness? I can bring things up to you. I can check you. You can check me. Even if we're not in constant contact isn't what makes a friendship. It makes touch points, but the depth of it is measured by many other factors, I think.
It's not one of those things where like you're going to find friends that can match you 100% in what you do. Again, take away the obligation, but I'll never forget a client that I had that they could afford a box for the Super Bowl, and they decided to do that, and they wanted to have their friends, and they had a blast, and it was wonderful. And then I'll never forget, like, this person was sick, called a friend, said, I desperately need some chicken noodle soup. I need some orange juice, stuff like that. The friend went and got that stuff, and then the friend gave him the receipt and was like, can you Venmo me? The client was sitting in like I don't do Super Bowl so that I think you're going to pay for things. But it was a mindset thing. No one ever asked, like, can we kick in for a tip for the food service or it's anything for the Super Bowl? But then, boom, like, yeah, I can do that for you, but here's the receipt, right? And I think that you just have to pay attention to those conversations of like, this is where our friendship is going. Like, if people want to use my friendship so that it's, I bless them with things and resources I have around me, but they aren't willing to bless me with whatever resources they may have available to themselves, it's a different dynamic. And,
Totally.
we probably could flesh out a longer conversation on that point.
Even just the scorekeeping of it, like scorekeeping does not make a good friendship. Totally different. Like I've taken my friends out to dinner, I'll just put it on my card. And they're like, "Is that me?" I'm like, "Don't worry," because we do it to each other all the time. It's not like bigger ticket items, right? Yeah, like oh, I got the hotel, you can get dinners while we're there, or I got concert tickets. Are you down to go? Here's the cost, just so you know before if we want to split, and then we can split food. Like negotiating it is okay. We're not saying don't pay back or whatever, but like expecting it when it wasn't our like part of it, and the other person's been so generous. That's not the close friend that I'd want longevity with, if I may.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's something to just pay attention to. Like, again, it wasn't also don't go into resentment with this person, but then it's like, well, then that just better informs who I'm going to include next time.
Right. It's like noted.
Like
sometimes it doesn't need to be addressed by being direct. And this is coming from the assertiveness, person, but like sometimes the most assertive thing is the choosing inaction and then just noting it and moving forward differently.
Well, I think the assertiveness is the confidence in my own actions. Like, okay, so I'm just going to be confident next time. I'm going to think about who I include, because again, like I don't need you to woo me, and I'm glad that I can share these resources in certain ways. But when I can feel that I am being treated a certain way because of the resources I have, I'm going to believe you based off of your behaviors. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah. Definitely a longer conversation to be had from where we were able to unfurl this today. And if you are listening and you have like a friend example, please DM us or email us. And I think that would be worthwhile for us to keep in mind for future episodes. And then we will see you all in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Between Two Clinicians. We would so appreciate if this episode resonated with you, for you to share it with somebody, and also find your favorite podcast platform and like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. We would love to attract more listeners just like you and have this message be spread to whoever needs it. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.